Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce Manitoba Pulley Power Hour presented by 6P Marketing. Thank you very much for joining us for this first Provincial Ministers event of 2021. My name is Peggy May, and I am the CEO of Southport Aerospace Centre in Portage la Prairie and the chair of the board of directors of the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce. Manitoba Chambers of Commerce is the province's largest business advocacy businesses across Manitoba.
Looks like Peggy's having some technical challenges, so I might just jump in here. Oh, are you back, Peggy?
Oh, did I lose you?
We lost you.
I'm so sorry. Do you know where I got to?
I think you just got to today we're honored. So the second paragraph.
Okay, so sorry. Okay, so yes, today we are honored to be hosting Honorable Ron Schuler, Manitoba's Minister of Infrastructure, who I will introduce formally in a few minutes. Thank you, Minister, for being here with us today to talk about a non-COVID related topic. So won't that be nice? Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. First, 6P Marketing, a full-service creative agency and Manitoba Chambers of Commerce long-time breakfast series sponsor. I know we don't get to network and connect as productively in a webinar environment, so we deeply appreciate that you've stepped up to willingly be our presenting sponsor for this new series. And today's event sponsor, the Manitoba Trucking Association, thank you for advocating on behalf of the trucking industry. There are more than 400 trucking companies in Manitoba, which is a lot of trucking companies. We simply cannot express enough gratitude to our truckers right now. This group of essential workers has done so much for all of us amid the pandemic, risking their own well-being to deliver our goods. So on behalf of the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce, we thank you to all of our trucking industry. And now a few housekeeping items. We have muted all participants for best audio quality. Minister Schuler will have approximately 30 to 35 minutes to present. And then for the remainder of our time together, our Manitoba Chambers of Commerce President and CEO, Chuck Davidson, will go through some questions during the Q&A period. We've received some questions in advance, but by all means, if you have a question or something pops up during the presentation, feel free to enter it into the Q&A function of the Zoom panel, and Chuck will manage those in real time. So now let's introduce our guest speaker. Ron Schuler was elected as MLA for St. Paul in 1999 and re-elected in 2003, 2007, 2011, and 2016. He was then re-elected in the new constituency of Springfield-Richaud in 2019. Minister Schuler is a graduate of the University of Manitoba with a degree in international relations and has served as a trustee with the River East School Division. As an entrepreneur, former small business owner, and community volunteer, he has devoted his time to organizations like Big Brothers, Citizens on Patrol, Max Reinhard Theatre Centre, and the Canada Intercultural Council. He has 3 children and lives in St. Paul. Okay, Minister, floor is yours.
Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. And I want to give a shout out to Terry Shaw and the Manitoba Trucking Association. Thank you very much for being the sponsor. Terry Shaw is an amazing advocate for the Trucking Association, or as I would refer to him, he is one of those amazing birds under my saddle. And Terry, always great being in the same place as you. Wish it was in person. But again, thank you to you and your members for being a sponsor. President and CEO Chuck Davidson and the folks at the Chamber, thank you for putting this together. I'm going to jump right into it. I don't think I have a 30-minute presentation, so maybe we'll have time for a lot more questions. And I want to start off with indicating to all of you that right now we're in the here and now of COVID. So we have health, education, families. They're the ones that are on the front line. They're the ones that are dealing day to day with issues. But we're also under the impression that there will be the day after tomorrow when we come out of COVID. And we believe that Manitoba infrastructure, and I've had this discussion with the Premier and I've had this conversation with my colleagues across the country and the federal minister. There is going to be the day after tomorrow, and infrastructure is going to be one of those. So we're going to have to get kids out of their mom and dad's basement and get them out of playing Candy Crush and CERB and start getting them working again. And how better than to do it with Manitoba infrastructure, with infrastructure dollars. And I know the federal government is very committed at looking at putting more money into infrastructure. So what we have done as a department, we've not sat by idly, is we have come up with what we believe is a 3 priority plan for Department of Manitoba Infrastructure. And the first one is the Lake Manitoba Outlet. As you know, you've heard a lot about it. It's about a $540 million plan, which seems like a lot of money for 2 ditches, basically. But when you think of it, that the 2011 flood, by and large, cost Manitoba and Canadian taxpayers, we are tapping out as a little bit more than $2 billion. So we could have had 4 of these channels, never mind 1 being built, had we built it. It is something that was talked about for 60 years. It was supposed to have been built with the Winnipeg floodway. It was always one of those companion pieces. It wasn't built. So we've all heard that saying that, the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree, well, that would be today. So although we should have probably built this channel 60 years ago, might have cost us $20–30 million. We're planning on building it now for $540 million. Shows you how, when you wait, how quickly costs can go up. We are in the process. We're in the environmental process with the federal government. We are trying to establish with the federal government a good working relationship, and we have that. I have regular calls with Minister Wilkinson, and we're trying to move this project forward. Again, the environmental process, you've probably again read, there was some discussion end of last week about the narrows between the 2 lakes of Lake St. Martin, and that's already been engineered. So there's always a lot going on there. It's a project we're committed to. Our second priority, I think all the members of the chamber will be interested in, and we're calling that our economic corridor initiative. So we have highway number 1, which transports goods and services going east-west. We have highway 75, which takes traffic from the city of Winnipeg down to the United States. I'd like to point out that the border crossing at Emerson is the busiest border crossing after the Windsor border crossing. It is a major hub of economic activity, not just for the province, not just Western Canada. It is actually for Canada. So your government has spent $100 million on Highway 1 in the last couple of years, keeping our RTAC designation, $50 million on Highway 75, so that we keep that RTAC designation. We have spent a lot of money around Morris that we should be able to handle a 1997 flood. Not quite, but we'd almost be able to keep traffic going between our 2 nations. And that is something that we were working on. What ties those 2 economic corridors, Highway 1 and 75, that ties it together is the Perimeter Highway. So we believe the Perimeter Highway is going to become an increasingly part of our economic corridor. So if you're coming in from Eastern Canada with a truckload, Perimeter Highway, you go down south or you go north. And that's why we are looking at some major investments into the Perimeter Highway. I would suggest to you that over the last 10 years, there's been probably close to $400–500 million. We're probably tapping up close to $500 million on the Perimeter Highway. We announced St. Mary's Bridge. We would like to, acknowledge that we did the safety review, the first safety review. We've tried to remove all of the mud roads, all of the uncontrolled intersections off of the south perimeter. We still have a couple of years of work to do on that, and then we'll have that complete. It's never quite as easy. Evidently, you have to buy people's land before you can put a road on it. So we're in that process and doing that kind of work. We also did the That's all online if you want to have a look at it. It is very interesting, and out of that is why we already started implementing it with St. Mary. We also then announced the safety review part 2 of the Perimeter Highway. That's for the entire perimeter. I've suggested that the safer we make the Perimeter Highway, the more dangerous uncontrolled intersections become. You have these little mud roads coming out, somebody's pulling a horse trailer, and they don't do it often. They don't realize how much power it takes to get up to speed, and they pull into traffic and they expect all the semi trucks to somehow navigate around them. It has been identified as an issue. We are going to be going public, we hope within a month, on Engage Manitoba. We're hoping within a month, in which we're going to lay out how we're going to treat all the rest of the uncontrolled intersections on the perimeter highway. It is a priority because it ties into that economic corridor of Highway 1 east-west, Highway 75 going north-south. We would actually like to see the perimeter, and for those highways someday, get freeway status, that they would then be viewed as our neighbors to the south do, as a freeway system, which would only have bridges, and it would be a controlled access. So that's a priority. Our third priority has to do with RTACing a grid across the province of Manitoba. This is also something we're going to be reaching out to you as a chamber and to Manitoba Heavy and AMM and all the other organizations. We believe that one of the things we have to do as a province, and again, this has to do with the day after tomorrow, we would like farmers and manufacturers, shouldn't matter where you live in this province. Maybe you grow a pulse crop that's really needed in the world. But if we can manufacture that into something, for instance, roquette, rather than shipping our peas to international countries, and then they process this and they get all the money. I mean, really what roquette is doing is processing our product, and that's the value added. The problem is across the province, there isn't a proper RTAC grid that you can get onto that then connects to the Highway 1, Highway 75 perimeter that gets us to the markets we have to get to. It's easy to say, Asia would really like this product, but you can't get it off your farmyard because we have weight restrictions on. So we are looking at doing an RTAC grid for the province. I've seen a couple of drafts of it. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion about, well, wait a minute, why is it, that highway number, not this highway number? We appreciate that. And that's got to be part of the discussion. But we are committed to not just having an economic corridor of Highway 175 in the perimeter, but we've also got to give opportunity for anybody who lives anywhere in this province that they can tie into that corridor with an RTAC highway, and they can then get their product to market. We think those three priorities set us up for what we would like to see, a 5-year capital project. We would like to see that discussed publicly. We would like to see the 5-year capital plan being a working document. Keep in mind, we do live at the bottom of what used to be a lake. We get a flood. Guess what? Projects get pushed back because we have to do the here and now. We all understand that. But at least then we would have a plan out in front of organizations like yourself so that you know where we're going with this. I'd also like to point out, we had to right-size government when we became government. We couldn't continue on the way we were going. We, except for the little COVID thing, which has really taken us sideways, we really do have a handle on the finances. And that's why you will see every year we are moving our budget up. Our goal was to get us within 5 years back up to 400 million. I point out to you, the first full year of the previous government, when they were in government in 2021, they were spending 85 million. We are spending at least 400 million a year. With the Manitoba Restart budget, we're going to be in the range of approximately $500 million. We are putting real money into our highways to get them up to speed so that we have those economic corridors. So Lake Manitoba Outlet project onto its own, we understand the value of that project. It's a standalone project. The next two priorities are the economic corridor and the RTAC grid, which then will give us the basis of what our 5-year plan is going to be. It's going to give us a focus. It's going to give us a purpose of what we're going to do the next 5 years. We think that's important. Shouldn't matter where you live. Mine up north or in the southwest corner, you're growing some kind of an interesting pulse crop that if you manufacture it and you get it packaged right, you get it onto highway, you can get it to wherever the world needs it. I'm going to close by saying this. I am old enough, young enough, but old enough to remember a time when there were countries in this world who had their people starving. And I would point out China was one of them. And I would suggest to our brothers and sisters in China that they don't ever forget that lesson, that if you haven't got food, you don't have an economy. And that's where we come into it. There isn't a chance that Manitoba could ever consume what we grow and produce as a province. I suspect probably, 80% of what we produce in agriculture, we have to ship to somewhere else. That gives us an amazing opportunity. I would say to the Chinese, you're a little bit on a bubble right now, but the day was once when you were looking for our food. We feed the world, and we shouldn't just feed them with our raw materials, but why don't we look at producing it into something that the world needs? And I would suggest to you that Manitoba infrastructure plays an incredibly important role, that whatever you decide as a business, whatever you decide that you're going to do, and we would encourage you, be creative, take whatever it is you grow and produce it into something. Manitoba infrastructure is going to be there as your partner to help you get that to market, to help you get it sold. I think the world is going to be looking increasingly for better food. I think a lot of our attitudes has changed because of COVID. I think the way we view each other has changed. And if you look at shopping trends, food is done quite well. If there's one place people haven't stopped shopping, it is in buying food and good food. And we produce some of the best that you can buy in the world. That is our commitment to you as Manitoba Infrastructure and your government. On behalf of Brian Pellister, Premier Brian Pellister, and our department and our government, thank you for this opportunity. And I look forward to all of your many questions. Thank you.
Minister Schuler, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon and for those introductory comments. As Peggy had mentioned off the top, we do have a Q&A function in here. I know we've got close to 70 people on the line that I'll run through some questions, but if you have some additional ones, we'll go into the Q&A function. One of the great things, and you touched upon it, was the Manitoba Trucking Association agreed to come on as our partner and a sponsor for this event. So we actually have a couple of video questions that maybe we'll start with. So I will ask through the technology if maybe we can play the first video, which outlines the first question. See if we can get that rolling.
Hello, I'm Bernie Dreger, President of Portage Transport and currently the President of the MTA. Minister Schuler, supply chain efficiency is key to Manitoba's future success. How do Manitoba's plans for infrastructure investment, particularly the proposed roundabout on the Trans-Canada Highway and Highway 16, support our province's ability to compete?
All right, Minister Schuler, we'll take that first question from Bernie Dreger.
Bernie, thank you very much for that question. I have a feeling I answered most of that by explaining that the economic corridor tied in with the RTAC plan that we have, that we give individuals the opportunity to get their product onto a highway. And if those of you remember, there's that whole Viter plant they manufacture. In fact, they manufacture the COVID beds right now. The problem was they couldn't get out of their factories because there were load restrictions in spring, and by the time they got anywhere near an RTAC highway, their product was so dirty it was a real problem. Our government stepped in. We built it's a very good highway. It's an RTAC highway paved, and I think they've almost doubled their businesses. So somehow we don't always think of Manitoba infrastructure as being an impetus for business development. We think it is. We're there to partner with you. And Bernie, hopefully we'll have something fairly soon to go out and consult on. That intersection is a very tough one, simply because there's so much happening at 16 and number 1. We'll have something to come out with, and hopefully you'll appreciate what we've done and weigh in on it. Thank you.
Minister, can you maybe just touch upon, and I know this is one that you just kind of mentioned, the Highway 16 kind of and Highway 1. What is kind of the process that you have to go through in terms of making a significant infrastructure change like that? I mean, maybe just walk some of our viewers and listeners through in terms of what a change like this and the consultation process before you can make moving on something like that.
You know what? Thank you very much, Chuck, for that question. Because we have two major highways, Highway 16 and number 1 intersecting, that in and of itself would be simple. We just have to build a bridge and on and off ramps and we'd be fine. The problem is we're right there with the railway. So initially the proposal had been they would build a structure for the highway and then going over the railway. By the time they engineered it with all the land acquisition and all the rest of it, they were sitting at about $160 million or $180 million. And the whole project fell apart and the money went to other projects, other priorities. So what we're trying to do is do something at that intersection to get something done. Folks, I've been around long enough in this department. This is one of the things we always get. You know, if you do this highway, if you RTAC this highway, we'll give you the land. No, even better, we'll pay you to take our land. And then we go, you know, to formally acquire the land, and then we find out that the people want the same price as land that's paid for in Hong Kong. So there's always this issue, and we're dealing with certain people right now who agree on the price, who agree that we have to buy the land, but they won't sign off on it because they think that if they wait and it ends up in court, they end up with more money. It is one of the biggest problems we have as a department is acquiring right-of-ways, acquiring land. It's very controversial. We pay an absolute premium. So I see it all the time on my Twitter account, which I actually don't do myself, just so you know. Some reason they won't let me be on Twitter. Can't imagine why. And we always get, yeah, but you're stealing people's land. You know, you ripped off my relatives. Actually, no. The biggest problem is land acquisition. Then the other thing is we have to also engineer it. We can't just build a bridge that's going to fall down. We have to look for major pipelines, oil lines, electrical utilities. That actually stalls it. The engineering process, once we have a concept, we have to go for public consultation. We take all of those comments back. We put them back in, then we go for more of a final design. It goes out for consultation. We bring back the comments, make a final design, and then we go to tender. Folks, there is no way ever that we could just go out today and build a project without some public consultation. Those days are over. I would say from start to finish, it's about a 2-year process with all the consultation and the feedback coming back. I had a neighbor got me at a restaurant, tore a strip off of me why it took so long to build a bridge. And I actually suggested to him that maybe he should put his engineer ring back on his pinky because it seemed to be missing. I mean, it is a very tough process. Got to make sure the bridge doesn't fall down, but the public consultation is a really big part of it. And then we still have to buy the land.
So what would be sort of a realistic time frame then for the 16 and Highway 1 interchange? Are we looking to 2 to 5 years still?
No, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It all depends on what the engineers come back with. Okay. Like St. Mary's, we announced it last spring, and we're already going to have shovels in the ground this spring. We hope to have the contract let sometime this early spring. So okay. You can move it forward, but remember that St. Mary's was part of the whole functional study, which WSP did. So there were all kinds of rounds of open houses. So we already had done our public consultation on it. So that was a 2-year process. So St. Mary's is almost unfair comparative because we had already done the public consultation.
Okay, excellent. So let's go to, we've got another video. We've got Jason Dubois from Dubois Trucking has got a question for us as well. So we'll do the technology once again. We'll see if we can get it to work a little bit smoother this time. And we'll have Jason Dubois ask a second question from Manitoba Trucking Association.
Good afternoon. I'm Jason Dubois, President of Len Dubois Trucking and Dubois Global Logistics. I'm also the Vice President of the Manitoba Trucking Association. Minister Schuler, Manitoba is a province of traders. Manitoba's economy is dependent on its supply chain, and that supply chain is dependent upon trucking. As you know, trucking is subject to a broad and complex range of regulations. These regulations can support or impede Manitoba's success by how they impact the trucking industry. Effective regulations are welcome and support efficiency. However, we all acknowledge the importance of identifying and addressing red tape. Minister Schuler, my question for you is, how does Manitoba Infrastructure plan to address red tape issues, particularly related to the supply chain and the movement of commercial vehicles? Thank you.
Great question from Jason. Minister, red tape.
You know what, thank you so much. And interesting enough, on Friday, we had our Council of Ministers meeting with all the ministers of transportation and the federal minister. And the problem with the whole trucking thing is that it crosses provincial borders, which then makes it a federal jurisdiction. And then there's still the trucking that happens within the province, and then that's provincial jurisdiction. And I agree with you, Jason, we need to cut more red tape. We've tried to do that. I think we're prepared to take on more of the issues. You know, we spoke with the federal minister. You know, we're not against the electric log books, the computerization of the logbooks. It's just that the feds haven't nailed down one technology that they recommend. So we're coming up against this deadline, and the feds haven't even told us which electronics they're going to accept as being the standard. So I understand very much so that the trucking industry keeps getting caught, and certainly in COVID, the trucking industry, which really was our lifeline. I mean, you wouldn't have had oranges and bananas without the trucking industry. Yet they're the ones that had all the washrooms and the restaurants closed on them. And we do hear that often people are very unkind to the truckers when they come in, because there's this stigma attached to somehow they're the super spreaders of COVID, which is furthest from the truth, because that's their livelihood. If there's something they're going to protect, is going to be their health. So, we get that. We are looking at some more changes. You've got an amazing organization. I miss coming to your banquet. Just for the record, I think I've lost almost 30 pounds by not going to all those dinners. Seriously, that's a really good dinner. Chuck, next time I'll take you as my date. They have just amazing dinner. And you know what? I appreciate when I get to code these dinners is the comments back and forth and the conversations. But you've got a government that's committed to deal with red tape. We are a little preoccupied with other stuff right now, unfortunately. Even writing legislation or writing regulation or reviewing regulation, everything is caught up with COVID. But no, we're there with you, and we agree there's still too much red tape.
Yeah, and Minister, to your point as well, I think this is something that I know people talk about, and they throw out sort of interprovincial trade barriers, and I always think of trade barriers. It's not necessarily it's more regulations in terms of across provinces, and you kind of touched on this, and I think Jason did as well. Just how do we streamline that in terms of what the regulations are across different provincial boundaries so that they're similar, so that the trucking regulations or regulations in one province are similar to what they are in others, because that seems to be the biggest hurdle from an economic standpoint. And we've had this discussion for years. So are we making any headway on this with the other provincial ministers and with the federal government?
Well, first of all, Chuck, you nailed it. The biggest impediment to any of this was the fact that we weren't part of the New West Partnership. We lost at least 4 years, probably 5 years. We are trying to play catch up. So for instance, if you were moving a large item from Vancouver to Winnipeg, every time you crossed the provincial border, you needed a different kind of a chase vehicle, you needed different signs on the vehicle, everybody had regulated differently. We have since then gone with that. You can have the same vehicles, same signs coming out of Vancouver right to Winnipeg. You don't have to switch out your vehicles and all your signs. That's the kind of stuff we have to continue to do. But you know what? We have at least 5 lost years because we were not part of the New West Partnership, and we've got to get in line. And you know what? Saskatchewan has done this preferential contract thing with their people that they give you extra points on when you bid for construction projects. for local benefit agreements. And both the Premier of Alberta and our Premier Brian Pallister have taken Premier Mode to task on this with Manitoba Heavy. That kind of stuff takes us backwards. That's what we don't want. We've got to get to the point where really there shouldn't be a difference when you're moving truck traffic, whatever it is that you're moving from Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC. And I take it your members probably know, but Ontario has also indicated that they are looking at joining the New West Partnership. Wouldn't that be fantastic if we could get, from Ontario West, everybody having the same kind of regulations? And we've got to get interprovincial barriers down. The regulations, seriously, why are we doing this? And it is something that we've worked on, and a lot more work to do. But again, there are a lot of individuals at the table that are lobbying government for a lot of things. So, and the COVID thing set us back terribly. I think we're going to end up losing a year, maybe even 2 years because of that.
Well, you would have full support from our organization in regards to the trade barriers in terms of simplification. I think that we hear that continuously from our members. Let's talk a little bit about, you talked about sort of the three main areas where, the provincial government and you're looking to make investments. And one, can we just start from the perspective of, obviously most businesses for the past 11 months, it's been COVID. Most investments have been made into, obviously the healthcare system. Additional investments have been made in terms of trying to keep businesses afloat during these challenging times. There's no question about that. But you talked a little bit about, making significant investments as well once we kind of get out of that, once we get out of this situation. So those kind of key investments to get the economy going. How big, from your department's standpoint, how big of a role do you see as infrastructure in terms of really kickstarting the economy as we come out of COVID?
Okay, Chuck, I don't have hard data in front of me, so sure. I'm going to create my own.
Yeah.
I'm under the impression that if you were going to do a poll, you would find people still a little hesitant to go shopping, although the malls are open and they're going shopping to the malls. But one of the things that they seem to be very comfortable, and that seems to be highway and road and bridge construction. There seems to be a real comfort level because, first of all, construction workers don't really hang around each other very closely. I mean, they do their thing. Social distancing is kind of their thing anyway.
And they're all following the protocols too.
And they are following them because they can't not, you can't be pouring concrete for 3 days and have half your team off on the final day. So it is a pretty strict protocol. And I think there's a great comfort. We invest in these construction projects. We also hire a lot of students. Manitoba Infrastructure hires anywhere from 200 to 600, depending on what our construction season is like. And that's not just Manitoba Infrastructure, it's also the construction companies, whether it's flag persons, whether it's testers, and all kinds of stuff. We hire a lot of students in infrastructure to help us with that construction season. Good paying dollars, they're good jobs. And it gets you financed again to go back to university. And there's a lot of comfort that if we're going to start the economy again, it's a good place, because I think Chris Lawrence has that number. For every dollar you spend on infrastructure, you get $3 back. People are going out and they're buying and investing and doing stuff with that money. It is a really good place to start. That's why we call ourselves the department of the day after tomorrow. And the Premier actually agrees. And that's why we've actually seen a lot of investment in infrastructure. We never stopped, folks. Manitoba Infrastructure and the construction associations and the truckers and everybody involved, heat, we never stopped. We kept going, and we do it in a responsible way, but important for us to get the economy going because our people buy local.
So as part of that kind of that restart you kind of talked about, and obviously, Minister Fielding, and we've had him on having discussions in regards to the upcoming budget. Should we be expecting significant investments in infrastructure in this upcoming provincial budget?
I think you'll be pleased. I am.
Will Chris Lawrence be pleased?
I think Chris Lawrence will be pleased.
Okay.
I always tell people, one of the things about, since we've been government. And a little bit of politics here. I was one of the first MLAs to support Brian Pallister as leader. And I have great love and appreciation for the Premier. He's incredibly kind and generous to me, incredibly kind to my family. My kids absolutely love the Premier and Mrs. Pallister. And he's been very good to this department. And we knew we had to right-size government. That one right-sizing that we had to do as a department, that was painful. We understood that. Since then, we've seen a lot of increase, a lot of money coming into infrastructure. There's been a lot of money that's gone out. And again, at the end, we spend that money. It's not like CERB. We spend money on infrastructure and we have something to show for it afterwards. Like the St. Mary's Bridge. Why did it take so long for us to get there? You know, we would like to see some more projects done on the Perimeter Highway. And, you know, it's time to get Manitoba moving forward. We are the day after tomorrow department. I think you're going to be pleased with this budget. It is a good budget, and I don't want to take any of the thunder from Minister Fielding, but I'm sure he also indicated to you that Manitobans should be very pleased with where we're going.
Well, and he'll be doing one of these MB Poly events with us the day after the provincial budget comes. So we'll be able to hold him to that. Maybe we'll take the tape from you, you know,
make it one of the
discussing
questions.
This. Exactly. So, you know, let's talk a little bit about, and you talked about this just in regards to strategic infrastructure plan and how central it is really to our trade profile. And you talked a lot about the opportunities in terms of movement of goods and services to other countries as a key part of our economic profile here in Manitoba and our ability to take advantage of those trade opportunities. How would you like to see Manitoba infrastructure positioned within the government's broader investment policy framework to really turn our province directly towards really boosting that trade? Maybe touch on that a little bit.
Well, I would suggest to you we are. And one thing I love about the Premier, sometimes up to 2-3 times a week, he's in his office, he has to stretch his legs. He walks over and sits down and we have a chat for 5 minutes, which is so much fun. And we talk about the priorities of government, where we should be going. There is a sense within your current government that infrastructure spending dollars, and that would also include what Reg Hauer is doing. You know, he's the one negotiating the ICEP dollars. You know, if we could get some of those dollars flowing, it's more of a horizontal. I tend to be more of the vertical, like, you know, the hospitals and schools. Obviously, that's more horizontal. But even a lot of the environmental programs, there are some serious dollars that could be coming our way once we get the federal government to sign off on them. Those hire a lot of people. Those get really good money into people's pockets. We always talk about the kitchen table. That's going to be a discussion we're going to have. I would suggest to you, you've got a government that has definitely embraced Manitoba infrastructure and Reg Hauer's department, which the name seems to escape me right now. I'm looking at my staff.
Central Services.
Oh, there we go. You know, very important that when we talk about getting out of the COVID thing, that we have money going into something that we have something to show for, but also that we will start circulating money in the economy and to get people confident. I think it's going to be a confidence thing. I believe if people feel confident that we're over the worst, that things are looking up, that things are going to get better, the economy will get better. We have to start encouraging people to be confident. I think if there's a criticism I have, not members of yours, I don't think, of others, and I won't mention the media, is we got to cut back on the angst and the fear. I think we have to start talking a little bit more of hope, and Manitoba infrastructure is that department of hope.
Let's talk a little bit about that relationship with the federal government, specifically in regards to the ICEP funding. And I know municipalities have been waiting to hear about the approvals for the ICEP grants from back in the fall of 2019, and obviously the last year has been, you know, one of extraordinary measures across the board. But I'm wondering if you can provide a bit of an update in regards to where we are at with sort of those ICEP funding requests that have gone to the federal government. And when we might see some of those projects be able to move forward.
Well, Chuck, I would recommend that you bring Minister Hauer in, and he could give you a lot more of the detail discussion on that. I know that we're in the process. I believe it's gone through our processes now. It is with the federal government, and they are working on it. I love when individuals come up to me in a grocery store and they say, okay, you announced the bridge 3 times. Why haven't you built it yet? Well, we haven't engineered it yet. We announced that we're going to start the engineering process and there will be a public process and all that kind of stuff. So I think even with the federal government, they realized that although they had wanted the dollars out faster, there is an important process. I would suggest you get Minister Halloran. He could probably lay out to you exactly where that's at. We are confident that this will move ahead. I think there's a lot of pressure on organizations like yourself, Manitoba Heavy. Others are saying, okay, it's time to start flowing those dollars, get the projects moving so we can start employing people and we can start moving the economy.
And recently as well, I would expect that you're going to see additional dollars coming from the federal government as well for infrastructure projects. And I know that they recently announced, significant dollars for transit in the neighborhood of about $15 billion for public transit and funding. And a number of that is for potentially shovel-ready projects. Are these the kind of programs that Manitoba has the ability to take advantage of that the federal government is putting out?
Yeah, I'm not too sure about that particular one. I would suggest to you that, for instance, one transportation infrastructure program or project in Ontario is about between $3 and $4 billion. So I hope it wasn't a program that was geared to very big urban centers. We will have a look at it. We hope the city of Winnipeg has a very good look at it because, that might fit into their capital plan, what they're planning on doing. We would have liked to have seen less siloed announcements. For instance, what we need in Manitoba more so than public transportation programs is we need far more green projects, sewers, lagoons, a sewage treatment. We've got to upgrade from people having their septic field and going on to proper pipes and having it properly treated. I think that's where we are probably more on the green stream. We would have liked to see a lot more going into those kinds of projects. And those, you invest in those and there is a huge benefit to communities.
Is that part of the problem with some of the federal programs is that there's not the flexibility for the various provincial governments and municipalities in terms of what their needs are, that they're typically put into specific buckets? And I know on this issue specifically, whether it's the ISIP program or others, that, a lot of it has been, tailored towards transit and like you mentioned, we have other priorities. So is that part of the challenge as well in dealing with other governments in terms of how they're outlining their priorities, but they don't necessarily fit the priorities of the individual provinces as well?
Yeah, and again, I understand that the size of this nation is so epic, the second largest landmass in the world as far as a country is concerned. And I don't think you can do one of these programs and say, okay, this one's going to fit for everybody. It doesn't. It's not going to fit for everyone. And that is one of the problems with this. So a program that would work for, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, I don't even know if it works for Edmonton or Calgary, but, it's those major centers and they could gobble up that 12 to 15 billion easily, right? It wouldn't be much left behind. They don't necessarily work for us here. We can't build a subway system in Winnipeg because we're gumbo. The shifting that happens in our soil, it just wouldn't work. So if we do anything, it's what we're doing right now, rapid transit corridors, and maybe someday we could put some track down and run some, electric trains on them. Maybe we could do that kind of thing. But, the dollars aren't really workable for us. So the problem with these projects, they were meant to be certain markets, but they don't work for ours.
You talked as well in your opening comments, just in regards to a bit of a change in the way government is doing things with sort of the 5-year capital budgets. Maybe talk a little bit about, why the government's moving to that approach and what you see as the real opportunities in taking that approach for Manitobans.
The problem is we've never done it before.
Right.
So, Chuck, it's never been done like that before, Oh, I don't know. And it's fighting that inertia. I'm just saying it's a little cheeky and I apologize for this. Why don't we let Manitobans see what Putin and the Russians and the Chinese get to see anyway? I mean, they're hacking into everything. You know, the only people that don't seem to be able to see what we have in our budget is our own people. Like, why can't we be open and transparent about that? It doesn't mean that in 5 years, that's exactly what we're going to build, because we could have an epic flood or an epic something, and we have to take our dollars and we have to repair what we had. So that then bumps year 5 into year 7 and year 8. Everybody gets that. You know, people are smart. So why don't we make this more of a public process? And that's the commitment we've made to a lot of our stakeholder groups, is that we are going to, again, we have to be careful, because there is this thing about confidentiality of budget making. So it's not carved in stone. No, this isn't the next 5-year budget for Manitoba infrastructure. What it is this is what we're going to engineer towards. This is what we're going to try to do. Also, we could go into year 4 and 5 and we could pull a project forward. If we happen to have the money and another project didn't seem to work because of whatever reasons, we could then pull projects forward. It would be a far better budgeting process for us. But good heavens, you can go online and you can just about find anything you want. If I actually Googled Chuck Davidson, there would be more information than I actually wanted to have about Chuck Davidson and his life. You know, why can't we put a 5-year plan out? Good heavens, that's hardly a state secret. I'm convinced Putin looks at my budget every day and wonders what I'm doing in my office here.
So when can Manitobans expect to see this sort of 5-year capital plan?
We are working towards that right now.
Okay.
So
would that be something following sort of this year's budget that we can see kind of moving forward to have a better sense? Because I think it makes a ton of sense. Because I think then you have people in various parts of the province kind of figure out where their project fits in the queue and when they can expect it to be done. I mean, the city's kind of moved to that kind of direction as well, which I think is beneficial. And I think the two makes a ton of sense to link.
Yeah, and you know, you can call it your 5-year wish list. You can talk about that. This is what we're going to start engineering to. It fits into our 3 priorities: Lake Manitoba Channel, you know, the economic corridor, and the RTAC grid. Doesn't mean that other projects don't fit in there, because there are always, you know, culverts and ditches and, you know, other stuff that we have 19,000 kilometers of roads that we have to maintain. So they have to fit in there as well. But I think it gives a lot more certainty. It lets people know what we're actually looking at doing. And I think it's just time that we do it.
You mentioned as well in your opening comments in terms of what your priorities were, and I think we've touched upon a number of. I think the Lake Manitoba outlet, I think we understand that one. That one's continuing to, you know, to move forward. You talked about that economic corridor being the perimeter and 75 and 1. The one I want to spend a little bit of time on is the RTAC program that you addressed in terms of. Is there currently like a model to provide to Manitobans in terms of what the current RTAC standards are for certain highways, and what would be the determinations to be able to make changes to that, and how big of a priority do you see that being?
Well, I can't let you see it because Chuck, I'd have to kill you. But I have my laptop is right on top of the first draft of what we're talking about, and I mean, basically, RTAC is a national designation. So we go A1, and then it's RTAC. So highway number, take all loads.
Right.
What we would like to do is build a grid. So it's not going to be every north-south highway, provincial road. Like, we can't do that. That's not reasonable. We're only 1.2 million people. But what we will do is do a grid across that. You don't have to drive that far, and you get onto a proper paved RTAC road. Proper shoulders, it's got the width. If you have a big project, you know, the RCMP, you have to pay for it. They block off, you know, and that you can move your large projects to market. So we plan on going out with it. We want to go on to Engage Manitoba and get feedback from all, you know, yourselves included, your members, you know, Heavy, MTA, all of those. Tell us what you think. And I have a feeling we're going to get an awful lot of opinions. There's one thing about Manitobans. Ask 2 Manitobans, you get 6 different opinions. I think we're ready for it. I think we're ready to get feedback, and it's an interesting grid. I think, you know, everybody's going to first of all look to their little hometown and how does that fit? Obviously, that's going to happen, but we also have to look at a larger picture.
And so the plan on that is you will be sharing that RTAC sort of network, what it looks like, getting feedback, and then releasing it
And then-
publicly. Is that the plan?
It'll go public. We'll say this is what we came up with. We'll get a lot of feedback. Chuck, I am surprised. We put something out on COVID and we get anywhere from 30 to 60,000 Manitobans weighing in and giving us advice. You know, this having a gym or an arena and putting up some tables and some boards and you get 20 people out for it, that doesn't work. We find that Engage Manitoba, we're getting far more people engaged, giving us good advice. So we would put out really a draft. It would be a discussion draft. We would like to know what Manitobans think. And I know it's going to come back with people saying, well, you know, what happened to, you know, this one's more important because I have a barn there and not so important because he has a barn there. I get that. In the end, we're going to have to come down on some kind of a grid, but we're going to give Manitobans the opportunity to weigh in on it. I think you're going to appreciate that we finally have this conversation.
And then based on the results of that grid, that would, I'm guessing, determine where you're going to make key investments.
That is correct. We already designated Highway 23, which, by the way, was third world conditions. I'm sorry, Chuck, I am a politician. Previous government absolutely horrendously neglected the southwest of Manitoba. I mean, we were driving with a departmental F-150 because they didn't want me taking my sewing machine out on those roads. You know, we had to go down to like 70 kilometers an hour because the roads were so rough. We have mud boils coming out on what are supposed to be highways. Like the southwest, that's why Highway 23 is getting a major rebuild. That will be part of that RTAC grid. Again, the rest of it, I think we should leave. I don't want to preempt myself. Have a look at it and have a look at what we're planning, what there is already for an RTAC, and what we're looking at planning for in the future.
And so we've got some of our chambers from Northern Manitoba on here as well. So that would be part of it in terms of having the ability to provide input in terms of the use of those highways as well, to make sure where those investments are going to take place, knowing that, larger trucks carrying, ore on a lot of those roads in Northern Manitoba is commonplace.
Absolutely. And it is very important that we, first of all, keep what we have up to an RTAC standard. Number one is you can't let slip what you got. And then number two is where do we have to improve on RTACing? And we've started that process already. And it was sort of the work that was being done the last 2-3 years. I kept coming back to, shouldn't we just designate a grid and then be building to that? The department has done a magnificent job. There's going to be a lot of work coming out of Manitoba Infrastructure for rural municipalities and just even how we're going to designate highways. We're looking at modernizing that as well. So a lot of exciting stuff coming out. We're not just sitting here. We're doing a lot of work, Chuck.
Minister, we got a couple minutes left. I got a couple quick hitter questions we're going to give you from the Thompson Chamber of Commerce. So I think we may need to set up a side meeting for you on just in regards to they're spending a lot of time on, one of the big challenges that they're having, and I know you've heard this issue as well, is just in regards to restrooms, public restrooms on highways from northern communities as an infrastructure piece. And if, I'm wondering if you can shed some light on that issue because we've heard it on numerous occasions that there is a need for, specific infrastructure along highways as well.
Yeah, and I appreciate that question because of how tough it is. The problem, it's not like people say, well, why can't we have like the I-94 in the United States that have these magnificent locations you can get to? Well, first of all, they have probably 1 million people driving by there on a day, not 1 million people living in a province. And we have to always remember that there's got to be security. Like it's when we build these facilities, they have to be secure and they have to be maintained and all the rest of that. And you wouldn't believe how many people go in, they'll actually steal a toilet out of one of these.
Yeah.
It's that kind of stuff. So we're trying to engage with the communities if there isn't a way to partner with them. It's a tough one because you have like 3-4 hours stretches where there's no washroom. But I would point out to you, it's a 3-4 stretch where nobody's watching them as well, right? So vandalism is a really big issue. who maintains them, who provides, it's got to be a secure kind of a thing. Anyway, we're prepared to deal with them on that one.
Okay, so
It's an important conversation, but it's a tough one.
okay, and then the other question I know I have, and I know in terms of Thompson in the north, they're really having a focus on electric vehicles and the EV industry as well. And whether or not, and one of the challenges obviously with EV is just having charging stations throughout the province. I know some private sector companies have started taking this on, but is that something that that Manitoba Infrastructure or the province would look at, is increasing EV stations in the province as well into some of these communities?
First of all, that's probably better sent to Minister Guimard, and her department name is
Conservation,
Sustainable Development,
climate, yeah.
Oh, that name's been changed. Climate Change and Environment or something. That's where that conversation has to be. You know what? We have to have a conversation about electric vehicles. And I don't know if you've talked to very many people. When it got to -40, their lifespan wasn't that strong. So if we're talking about putting charging stations on our highways, like how often do we put charging stations? And it wouldn't be something that MI would lead on. Certainly we would make sure that it's engineered, that it's safe to get on and off, that kind of a thing. But as people move towards more electrified vehicles, conversation we have to have, and maybe you should have Minister Guimard on one of these and put that question to her.
Minister Schuler, I really appreciate you taking the time with us this afternoon. We got through a lot of topics, and some great discussion on sort of the future plans for Manitoba Infrastructure, and where your department's going in the future. So on behalf of the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today and answer some questions. As well, I will throw it back to Peggy May with just some final remarks. Peggy.
Great. Thank you, Chuck. And Minister Schuler, that was a great discussion. We're very grateful that you were able to join us today to share an update. Infrastructure investments, both traditional and digital, are going to be so crucial to our recovery. 2020 has certainly created that deficit in our province, and we're hopeful for some solid infrastructure announcements in that budget next month. Before we sign off today, a few final thoughts. Now more than ever, we must work together as a business community, no matter the size of our organizations or the sectors that we're in, to determine how to move forward. We heard last week from TD Bank's Group's Deputy Chief Economist that there are indeed some bright spots in 2021, but that the work of recovery has only just begun. The Manitoba Chambers of Commerce is committed to consulting with our business community about how best to help you. And as we want to be the most effective support and advocacy organization we can be, naturally, we're still primarily focused on communicating about pandemic relief that will help us see us through to the other side, of course. Please watch for a couple of upcoming resources: our Coronavirus Business Survival Guide and a dedicated website, Manitoba Business Matters, currently in development. Our AGM and Manitoba Economic Summit have also been announced for May the 6th, 2021. We are sincerely hopeful that you'll join us as we set about championing the recovery strategies. Up next in the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce Manitoba Pulley Power Hour series, we'll host the Honorable Scott Fielding, Minister of Finance, to break down Budget 2021, the day after the budget drops. Please watch your email or check our website at jointhechamber.ca for those event details. And on behalf of the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce Board and staff, thank you once again, Minister Ron Schuler, 6P Marketing, Manitoba Trucking Association, and all of you for joining us today. Stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you in March.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
Thanks, everyone.
Great day, everybody.